I wanted to give people an idea of what it's like to live in the Yukon. I always say that in the far north, anything can happen and something always does. The first time I reached the Yukon, I felt like I was home. I think it was always inside me. I just had to find it. When my father passed away in 2002, he was 67 years old. He died with a lot of dreams left in him. I didn't want that to happen to me, so I sold my house in Denver and I headed for the Yukon Territory. I had spent a lot of time there over the years wandering around by myself on road trips. I found some property beside the same river, actually, that Jack London had traveled on his way to the Klondike. And then I completely reinvented my life. I dreamed of living in a remote cabin and being a writer. I found a small Yukon village that was just what I was looking for. Downtown Tagish was pretty much a gas station. The whole village had about 200 people in it. During winter, that number dropped much lower. 3 times a week you got your mail from inside an elderly woman's basement, actually. You'd stand near the washer and dryer and hope she hadn't given your mail to somebody else. A lot of my neighbors didn't have running water or telephones. We were all pretty self-sufficient, actually, because the village didn't have any medical services or police. It wasn't much that separated you from the wild things. On any given day I might see a moose in my yard, or a porcupine, or even foxes. They call the Yukon the land of the midnight sun because in spring and summer it stays light until midnight. And then the sun sets, but it never really gets dark. By 1 a.m. or so, you can see perfectly. By 5 a.m. it's broad daylight. Almost every night I'd slide the kayak into the river behind my cabin and paddle downstream. Then about 10 minutes I was in total wilderness. That area of the Yukon had the world's largest concentration of grizzly bears. You'd see their tracks on the riverbanks, and they were as big as dinner plates. And there were black bears too, but grizzlies eat black bears. I was more afraid of the grizzlies. I was paddling down a creek one day when I came up on a wolf. He was all white, and he wasn't more than 25 yards away from me. He stood there. He stared at me, and I stared at him, and I'm not sure which one of us was more shocked. And then all of a sudden he turned around and he disappeared instantly into the bush. It was like he vaporized, like he'd never been there in the first place. I'd fish until midnight. Good nights, I'd catch one pike after the other. None were smaller than 24 inches, and the biggest ones were almost 5 feet long. One night, I was trailing a big pike behind me in the kayak, and a bald eagle followed me home. I gave it the fish guts. I'm not sure which one of us was happier. Yukon winters were brutal. At minus 50 Fahrenheit, the thermometer stopped working. Cars didn't work either. Outside, if you spit in the air, it crackled and dissolved before it even hit the ground. When splitting wood or even walking around, you had to remember not to breathe through your mouth or else your lungs would freeze. I was one of the few people who lived there all year. On the coldest winter days, standing outside, there weren't any car noises, people's voices, not even birds singing, or the wind. Sometimes I wondered if I was the last one alive. I made friends with prospectors and people you might describe as mountain men. They taught me how to hunt and how to live off the land. Because of what I learned from them and from my own experiences, I felt completely at home in the wilderness. It requires staying alert and constantly firing on all cylinders. I think that's why I like being alone out there. I felt alive in a way I can never feel in civilization. The colors are richer, the air feels pure, you notice everything. I had another dream, which was to be a bush pilot. When I reached the Yukon, I enrolled in flight school right away. The only problem was that flying terrified me. It took a while before I stopped screaming in turbulence.
Victor, while retired, line up 25 or 26 at Foxtrot.
In winter, we flew in sub-freezing temperatures. It got so cold in that little airplane I couldn't feel my feet on the rudder pedals. When it dropped to minus 15 Fahrenheit, they grounded the plane. I only pretended to be disappointed.
Victor, right turn, 12606 from Foxtrot, clear takeoff on way 26.
The Yukon can be a dangerous place to fly. There are a lot of mountains and very few places to land in an emergency. And without radar, you're pretty much on your own. I'll never forget flying beneath the northern lights. And on more than one afternoon, I passed a bald eagle flying beneath me. By the time I got my pilot's license, I could land on the side of a mountain, but I'd made plenty of mistakes along the way. In fact, I consider it a miracle I didn't kill myself.